Yes, thank you. I move around, so okay, Sio, Nico Dawadoa, G Chalaki, Bigarasda Husky, Alena Nehia, Ulisdani Neganeshwa. So, good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all here for day 2. And my name is Nico Albert Williams. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, and I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I am the chef and owner of a company called Burning Cedar Indigenous Foods. And we specialize, we're a catering and consulting company, and we specialize in traditional and modern Native American food. And so, our tagline here is telling the stories of Native America through the language of food. And really that just is the beginning of a long conversation of representation and visibility for Indigenous people in the modern context of food and culture. And so that's what a lot of the work that I do is taking people from knowing absolutely zero about Native American food to having an understanding of what that means and how that ties to the people in their community, whether they're Native or non-Native. And so through education, outreach, and delicious meals shared in community, we increase visibility, advocate sovereignty, promote healing and wellness, and create positive contemporary narratives about Indigenous peoples in our own words. Which is what I think there are many movements striving to do across a lot of different mediums, and ours just happens to be the language of food. And so I'll tell you a little bit about my background before I get into the storytelling portion of what I'm here to do today. I was born and raised in California and in Arizona. And so I was raised away from my Cherokee community. And my family didn't have much of a connection to the Cherokee community, being that we'd been in California for, I think, 3 generations. And so I was raised being very proud to be Cherokee, knowing my family history and all of that, but not having the community around me to support me in that. And so through a series of life events, after I graduated high school, I was living in Phoenix, Arizona, and going to Arizona State, and I was left there basically by myself because my dad got transferred to a little town in northern Oklahoma called Bartlesville. And it was seemingly random, but I don't believe in random in this world. And so he happened to be transferred to the northeastern homeland where my mother's family were removed from their original homeland of Georgia in the Appalachian Mountains. And so it just seemed to be too much of a coincidence that they would be right back in the community of my mother's people. And so I went back home to reconnect with my immediate family and then my larger Cherokee family as a result. And the very first way that I was able to really make a meaningful connection in my Cherokee community was through food. That's something that a lot of people struggle with reconnection is how do I even feel, how do I even begin a journey like that? And I was already in the food industry. I started in high school working as a hostess, working my way up, found my way into the kitchen and discovered that I really loved cooking and had a knack for it in a professional sense. And so, I already had that background of food as a language. And then when I started spending more time in Oklahoma, where I was surrounded by Native people, finally, I was invited to places to eat. And that's like the first thing that happens, right? When you meet someone new or you're building a relationship with someone, you're gonna go eat with that person and share meals. And so the first for me was our wild onion dinners in the spring. And so that was kind of my way of learning about everything about Cherokee food, not only the seasonality of it, but the things in our land that we harvested wild, the things that we made. The parts of a wild onion dinner are a little bit of parts of the entire history of the Cherokee Nation. You know, there's fry bread and grape dumplings that came to us after removal, and those were survival recipes. And then there were wild onions that were things that we were able to harvest and cook up with salt pork that were from another different part of our history. So it's a great way for me to learn through a language that I identify with what it means to be a member of my community. And so part of the way that I learned the meaning of our foods was through stories. You know, a lot of times when you're sitting around and having these meals, these stories come up because they'll remind someone of an ingredient or something. We have a lot of food stories in Cherokee culture, so I'm here to share a couple of those with you today. And the significance of that storytelling is very important. As Indigenous people, we are inherently storytellers, no matter how, what language we're telling a story, whether it be through our beadwork or our songs or our dances or our food, we're telling stories. Food especially carries an emotional memory. Aromas and flavors make an imprint on our mind and have the powerful ability to return us to a particular place, person, or experience with more intensity than a visual or auditory reminder. I think everybody has that trigger where if you smell a certain smell, it immediately makes you think of something emotional. And so I have a lot of those, and that's the tie that our brains have to sense of smell and sense of taste. It's a very emotional sense. Part of the medicine of Indigenous foods is the spiritual and cultural connection that comes with them. In addition to all of the nutritional aspects and medicinal aspects that we've been talking about today, or this whole conference, is the spiritual and cultural connection of our foods. And at the heart of every traditional dish is a story, and those stories can tell us a lot of different things. They can, these stories are teachers, so they can tell us how to nourish our bodies, why and when to eat certain things, how we should treat one another. They teach us about our relationship with each other and the natural world. And they teach us where we come from. They give us our histories. And all of that kind of ties together to identity. They tell us who we are. So the first story that I'd like to share with you is my personal favorite story in my Cherokee repertoire that I know so far, is the origin of plant medicine. And this story starts the way that a lot of our stories start, which is in the very beginning, when everything was brand new. And all of the humans and the plants and the animals, they all lived and shared the land and water together. And they all spoke the same language. And they all lived in a balance. And in Cherokee culture and in our language, we have a concept of wellness that we call tohi. And tohi is, it's not just about health, it's not about your physical stamina, it's about your relationship. And so for Cherokee people, when we say, hello, how are you? We would say, Osio, hello, Tohichu, how are you? That's, the very first thing when you're exploring a language is you learn to introduce yourself, right? But we're not really saying, how are you? We're saying, are you in balance with the world around you? So tohi, health is more about more than the absence of disease. It includes a fully confident sense of a smooth life, peaceful existence, unhurried pace, and easy flow of time. The natural state of the world is to be neutral, balanced, with a similarly gentle flowing pattern. All aspects, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, figure into the Cherokee concept of good health. So, tohi, good health. When you say, are you in good health? We're asking, how are you in relationship to everything in the world around you? And not just the people, but the plants and the animals and the land and the water. Is everything flowing easily? And I've heard this described as like a stream flowing. Sometimes a stream is flowing fast, or sometimes it's just meandering. It depends on the land that it's in relationship with. Are you the warrior who's running at breakneck fast speed after his prey, or are you the old man shuffling along to go visit one of his relatives? Both of those are moving at their own pace, at the proper speed, and always moving forward. That is tohi. And so in the beginning, that is how all things were. Now, as can sometimes happen with humans, we started to forget that balance and our relationship with the animals in particular. And so humans started to hunt animals for sport or hunt animals for fun instead of just for the gifts that they were allowing us to receive from them. And so we started to over-harvest those animals and waste their gift. And understandably, the animals were upset about this. One of the most vocal in this upset was the awi, the deer. And so the awi went to our creator, Unet Manahi, and said, there has to be something to be done about these humans. They're really not respecting our place. They're not respecting these gifts that we give them. They're wasting it, and our numbers are dwindling. And so Unet Manahi sent down something that had never existed in the world before, and that was disease. Now, up until this point, humans had never had so much as a headache or a cold or anything like that. But now, it's kind of like this Pandora's box was opened into existence, and all of these different afflictions started to beset the humans. They had everything from those headaches and colds to arthritis and heart diseases and cancers, and the people started to suffer, and the people's numbers started to dwindle. This was also not Dodi, and the plants saw that. The plants are, we consider to be our teachers, right? Because the plants live quietly in the world, and they observe and they absorb things, and they know things. And so the plants as our teachers are also compassionate. And so the plants saw the suffering of us humans and said, well, this isn't quite the balance that we're looking for either. Let's find a way to reset this so that everyone can remember their role in the existence that we have here together. And so they went back to it, Unet Manahi, and said, how can we help with this situation? And so our creator gave the plants a gift, and that gift was medicine. Every single plant on the earth was given the power to heal something that ailed the humans. But there was a caveat to that. The plants didn't freely give this gift. We had to be in relationship with them to accept that gift. It's not like you can go out into the forest and say, well, I have a headache, so I'm just gonna pull this up and eat it, and I'm gonna feel better. That's not how it works. You have to have a relationship with the plants in order to receive that gift. So how do we have a relationship with a plant? Like, what does that even mean? Well, how do you have a relationship with your mom or your dad? How do you have a relationship with your sister, your best friend, your cousin, anybody that we have relationships with? We're all beings, and when you have a relationship with someone, you care for them, you know where they live, you know who's their family. That's the first thing you're gonna ask, right? Who's your family? You know who are their friends, who are their enemies. You know, do they like it when it's sunny? Do they prefer a cloudy day? What's their favorite time of year? When do they really come alive? Are your friends that person who's that pumpkin spice latte person who's like, it's my time of year? Or are they the summer person who wants to lay by the beach and is not ready for the heat to go away? What's their favorite food? What's the thing that really excites them when it comes around? How do they snack? Maybe you don't know that about all of your friends, but that's something you could talk about. Maybe not with your mom or dad, but it's healthy and it's okay. So those are all things that we know about people that we're in relationships with. We can know that about our plant relatives. We can know that about our animal relatives. And we should, because that's how to live in relationship with them. And our ancestors really did know that about everyone that they lived with, because they were in a good relationship and they lived immersed and they were observing things. And so that was the caveat that Unet Manahi sent to us, and that was our responsibility, and our gift was to receive those gifts from the plants. And these are some of the gifts that we receive from those plants, right? We receive the physical nourishment in the form of nutrition. We've talked a lot about that yesterday with Melissa, and if you were in Linda and Luke's speech yesterday, where we learned about all of the different things that plants can do for us, all of the different macro and micronutrients that we receive from plants that our ancestors received in a great abundance and great diversity. and things that we, our gifts have dwindled because we are not in relationship with as many of those plant relatives as we used to be. Mental health support by supplying those micronutrients vital to healthy brain function. Those are more gifts that we receive from plants that Dr. Terry was telling us about yesterday, if you were able to hear her talk. Not just those physical gifts of actual nutrients that hit our bodies, but also pride in our identity as Indigenous people. Our ancestors were climate scientists, biotechnologists, botanists, dietitians, and more. And the foods that they developed relationships with now feed the world. So these were all of the things that our ancestors learned from plants and then translated to teach each other. That's something to be very proud of. That's something that has been hidden from even our own people for a very long time. That's that invisibility that we talk about, that our history was, basically covered up to make us look like we didn't have any kind of nuanced knowledge or scientific understanding of the world around us, when truly our ancestors were undergoing scientific research constantly because they lived immersed in it every single day. They didn't wake up at a certain time of day and say, I'm going to go to the lab and study this. They lived and observed and lived that research every moment of their lives, and we benefit from that today. And we're finally getting some credit for it, right? Connection to past and future generations through our ancestral seeds. Those plants keep our stories for us. We in the Cherokee Nation have the Cherokee Nation Seed Bank, and a lot of different tribes have these seed restoration, revitalization, and preservation programs. And I work with a lot of different ones in Oklahoma. We have the kind of special situation where we have over 39 tribes in Oklahoma. And they're all kind of lumped in there together, but they all come from very widespread places all over Turtle Island. So there's people like, my Cherokee people who are from the Southeast. There's people like my husband's people, he's Ponca Oto Iowa, that are from like the Omaha, Nebraska region, Plains people. And they all brought with them their seeds. So those homeland plants came with them and continue to tell the stories of their people and their history. And we keep those seeds alive and give them to future generations so that we can always have those stories and those relationships with the plants. And they also give us lessons about our interaction with one another that have parallels in the natural world. So that's the storytelling aspect that we talk about when we have relationships with plants. The plants teach us things about who we are as a people. And so that kind of brings me to the second story that I want to tell you guys, which is the story of the first strawberries. And this is kind of a fun one, and I love that the Ojibwe people up here call it the heartberry, because we have a very similar relationship with the strawberry in Cherokee culture. And our story starts, again, at the very beginning of things, and we have a first man and a first woman. We call them Kanati and Selu. And Kanati is our first hunter, and Selu is our corn mother. And there's lots and lots of stories about Selu as our corn mother, but today she's just a wife and a partner and a companion. And she's the companion of Kanati. And they live in their mountain home together, and Selu makes stews out of corns and beans and things like that, and Kanati brings home fresh game, but they also forage for their foods, just like all of our ancestors did. And so, as they do almost every day, Kanati and Selu set off into the hills to go and look for food. And today, they happen to be looking for some tender young roots because it's springtime. And so they set out on their journey, on their path, and they're going along the way that they usually do. They kind of have a route, they have a system for this, and they're looking for these different little tender roots, what's shooting up, what would be really good to add to their stews for this afternoon's meal. And as they're walking, they come to a place where the road divides. The road kind of forks through different paths in the hills. And Kanati says, well, okay, we always go this way, so let's go down this path. I know that in years past, we've always found these good roots down here, and we'll find more today. And Selu says, well, wait, I think I can hear some samagogi chittering back here, and they sound like they're having a really good time. And those squirrels, they always know where to find the best roots. And so I bet they're digging some good things, and maybe we can go and find some too. Always observing the natural world and following cues from our relatives, the squirrels, and whoever else is in the forest sharing space with them, right? And so she wants to go down this new path. And Keynote says, well, let's not waste time chasing squirrels around the forest. We're just gonna go down this way, okay? And so she says, well, no, we're not going that way. And they have this argument. And so they decide, well, we're just gonna split up and go our separate ways and see who finds the most roots. And so Selu sets off walking on her path, and she's taking off at kind of that breakneck speed. And at this point, she's not even really looking for roots. She's just walking because she doesn't want anything to do with that man. And so Keynote's down the other way, and he's looking for his roots, and he's finding things, but it's not really fulfilling to him because he doesn't have his companion there to share that road with. And so he decides he's made a very grave error in judgment, and he wants to go back and reunite with Selu. And so he turns back and he's trying to catch up with her, but she has taken off at such a clip that he can't catch up. And so he calls out to his friends, the deer, and the deer say, hey, if you run as fast as me, maybe you can catch her. And so Keynote is running as fast as a deer, and he still can't catch up to her. And so the crow sees him trying to do this, and the crow calls down from him and says, if you call out as loud as a crow, maybe she'll hear you and she'll stop. So call her name, Selu, Selu. And so he's calling for her, and he still can't get her attention because she's just way far ahead of him at that angry breakneck walking speed. And so finally, Unetlanahi, again, our creator, sees this struggle that Keynote is having, and so decides to take pity on this poor man and give him some help. He sees that Keynote needs some assistance and that he's truly remorseful for having spoken words quickly in anger. And so Unetlanahi says, okay, I'm going to help you slow her down so that you can catch up with her. I'm going to put her very favorite berry right there along the path, and she'll stop and you can catch up with her while she's gathering. And so Unetlanahi puts a beautiful bush of blueberries right out there in front of her. And usually this would stop Selu in her tracks. Those are her favorites. She would be gathering those all morning. But at this point, she's not interested in blueberries. She's just walking. She's just putting distance between her and Keynote. And so Unetlanahi says, well, okay, I'm gonna have to come up with something a little bit more drastic to stop her in her tracks. And so these great big blackberry brambles start growing on the sides of this path. And so the thorns are sticking to her skirt, and they're pulling her and saying, stop, stop. And she's like, no, I don't need to stop. I've had blackberries, I don't care, I'm going. And so Unetlanahi says, okay, now it's time for something really serious. I'm gonna have to create something new. And so Creator puts out these bright red berries like she's never seen before, and scatters them all over in the path right on her feet. So there's no way she can cross the path without crushing some of those berries. And if you've ever smelled wild strawberries that are ripened in the summertime, you can't smell that smell and not stop. And so she sees these bright red berries and she crushes them with her feet, and she smells that sweet smell, and she has to stop and try this new berry she's never seen before. And so she's eating these strawberries, and the sweetness and the brightness remind her of her love for Keynote and their companionship. And she thinks, these berries are wonderful, but they're so much better when there's someone to share them with. And so she stops and she starts gathering these berries into her basket. And she waits, and she turns back along the path, and she finally meets back up with Keynote and says, look at these berries I found. She's not even thinking about earlier when they disagreed. She's thinking that she wants to share these berries with someone that matters to her. And so the two of them continue along the path together, and they share those berries with the crow for helping. And they share those berries with the deer for helping, because everybody loves strawberries. And they take those berries home, and now they're a reminder to be patient and to listen to one another and to never forget the the kindness and compassion and love that we have for one another. And that's what those strawberries remind us of. And that's why we always preserve strawberries as well. You'll always find some sort of strawberry preserves in a Cherokee home because they're such a special and heartfelt reminder for us of who we are and how we want to treat each other as people. And so that's that first reminder in the springtime. That first berry that comes out is the berry that reminds us to be sweet to each other. And so that's another gift that we receive from plants, right? It's not just all of the powerful antioxidants and vitamin C in a strawberry. It's reminding us that we love each other and that we love the strawberry for sharing itself with us. So the gifts that we receive. This is an excerpt from Braiding Sweetgrass. I hope everyone in this room has read Braiding Sweetgrass. I'm sure that you have. It's like my whole personality is that book, basically. So from the viewpoint of a private property economy, the gift is deemed to be free because we obtain it free from charge at no cost. But in the gift economy, gifts are not free. The essence of the gift is that it creates a set of relationships. The currency of a gift economy is at its root reciprocity. In Western thinking, private land is understood to be a bundle of rights, where in a gift economy, property has a bundle of responsibilities attached. So when we receive that gift from the strawberries, or we receive that gift of medicine from the different plants that Ananahi gave to the plants, we're receiving that gift, but the gift is not free. In reciprocity, we have to accept the responsibility of receiving that gift. And so I have an analogy I like to use called the knitting analogy. And in the book, Robin Wall Kimmerer, I think, talks about a pair of socks or something that her grandmother knits. And a lot of times I'll change it up. Sometimes it's a sweater, and sometimes it's a scarf. I don't know, today it's a scarf. But the analogy is, if you go to Target or Walmart or wherever and you buy the scarf, it costs maybe, $8, $10, and you really like that scarf and it goes with all your outfits and it's great, and you wear that scarf all the time. That's one thing, right? But if you leave that scarf on the bus, or you leave it outside on the patio and it gets rained on overnight or something like that, it's like, oh man, I really liked that scarf, but I can get another one. Now, if your grandmother or your best friend knit that scarf for you, and you thought about everything that went into that scarf, you knew that she chose those colors specifically because she thought they really set your eyes off, and she spent all of this time and had a little bit of a ceremony while she was making that scarf for you, because she was thinking about you and how beautiful it would look on you and how it would keep you warm and all of the things that she wanted for you while she's knitting that scarf. All of that is knit into the fabric of that, right? You don't leave something like that on the bus. You keep it and you take care of it, you care for it. And that's your relationship that you have. It's a relationship with her. It's a relationship with the thing that she created for you. And it'll be a relationship to whoever you share that with. Maybe you pass that scarf onto your daughter because she has your eyes, and that scarf will set her eyes off. Well, all of that is part of that reciprocal relationship. You care for the gifts that people give you because you know the time and effort and love and energy that went into them. If we looked at every single thing in the world as a gift in that way, we wouldn't be in the climate crisis that we have right now, because we would be caring for those gifts and understanding all of the time and energy that went into them. A strawberry doesn't just pop up overnight. It takes a long time and a lot of effort and resources for the strawberry to gather up all of those minerals and develop all of those sugars in its flesh to be able to give us that sweet gift. So those are the reminders that we have to think of. And then we also have to think, this is reciprocal, right? You don't just receive a gift and go on about your way. When grandmother knits you that scarf, immediately after you appreciate that gift, you're thinking, oh, maybe I can make her dinner, or what am I gonna do, to repay her kindness, because I want her to understand how much I care for her just as she's made me feel cared for. So we need to think about what gifts we can give in return to those plants. Some of those gifts, again, suggested some of these by the book Breeding Sweetgrass. Land stewardship, activism, science, art, everyday acts of personal reverence, which is a long way of saying just appreciating in those moments the gifts that the plants give us, and proceeding in gratitude for those moments, living in gratitude, and ceremony. So I'd like to talk about cooking as ceremony. There's a lot of different ways that we cook. You know, have been told by my mother-in-law about the ways that the Ponca and Oto people lived before removal, and even after removal, when they set up home base in White Eagle and Red Rock in Oklahoma. The way that their homes were set up is they had their living spaces, and then their cooking space was a separate place because it was a place of ceremony. Every single meal was cooked in ceremony. So ceremony is not synonymous with holiday. And that's kind of a Western idea that's been introduced, or a European idea that's been introduced, that ceremonies are for that special holiday time that you do once a year. That's not what ceremony is about. Ceremony is an everyday thing. It has the power to make everyday actions sacred. So cooking a meal for someone, or cooking a meal for yourself, that can be ceremony if you do it in a certain way, if you prepare things with intention. So in this way, preparing things with intention, we can honor the ingredients and create ceremony around the ingredients and honor those gifts that we receive from plants and from animals. So gratitude and reverence for the ingredients. When we receive gifts from the natural world, whether we're foraging or we've grown something from seeds or we've harvested a wild animal, we give thanks for that. And we proceed with great reverence when we make that. We don't, chop things haphazardly. We make sure to minimize waste. Like, I believe it was Linda talking about yesterday, if you saw her presentation, keeping a baggie where you keep all of your onion ends and your celery tops and your herbs that are a little wilty and that weird carrot in the bottom of your crisper. All of those things we don't waste because that carrot took a long time to develop its sugars and to grow and to be there for you to receive its nutrients. We can't just throw it away, we save it. And so we put it in the freezer and we make stock from that later. All of these ways are ways for us to give that gift back by saying thank you, and we're not going to waste the gift that you've given us. Those are ways to indigenize our cooking. Now, the thoughts of the people who receive the food is also a way that we prepare food with intention. So just like the grandmother knitting that scarf, or the strawberry growing itself for you, when you're preparing food, the ceremony aspect comes into it with your thoughts and intentions as you're doing that preparation. So it's the same with, when you're preparing beadwork, or you're doing any kind of preparation like that, creating a painting or something like that. You're thinking about your intent. Who am I making this for? When I'm stirring a pot of soup and I know it's going to be for my family, I'm thinking about, my husband's back has been acting up lately. I really hope that this soup is comforting for him. I'm going to think about those things and put that energy into my stew. I'm going to be thinking about my daughter who's having a hard time at school with a bully. I'm going to be thinking, I hope that this soup maybe reminds her of who she is and gives her some strength to deal with that and to understand how to be compassionate with that person at school tomorrow. I'm thinking, I hope that the vitamins and nutrients from this stew that I'm making will help their bodies grow strong and heal things that are ailing them in their bodies. All of those things are what you think of when you're preparing the food. And so I've always been told to never prepare food when you're angry or when you're upset, because all of that energy really does go into your food. That's been a huge lesson in the professional world, right? That's part of decolonizing our spaces as well, is I had to come out of that cooking space where you see people like Gordon Ramsay screaming. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's putting the worst medicine into that food. Like, I'm not gonna eat that. think about what you're putting into your food, because that energy makes its way into what you're creating, and you're giving that gift to someone. And putting a bad energy into your food can completely negate all of the good medicine that those plants put so much time and effort into creating for it. So that's also honoring your ingredients. And making the best choices possible when you're gathering your ingredients to pass on good medicine. When I talk about gathering ingredients, now that can be gathering in the forest, that can be gathering in your garden, or it can be gathering in your supermarket. It's very difficult to connect with the ingredients and prepare food with intention when you're preparing something from a packet or a box. Because those prayers, when you're thinking about the path that all of your ingredients have gone on, I can't really think about, all of the effort that it took to grow that carrot, and then how I'm going to take that carrot and turn it into a gift for someone to accept all of that wonderful vitamin A and that delicious sweet flavor. I can't do that with the weird powder that comes in Kraft macaroni and cheese boxes. As good as that tastes, for whatever reason, I can't connect with that in ceremony. I just can't. You can put good intention into it. You can stir and put your love into that, and they'll feel that love, but it's just not the same. It's not ceremony. So how the bleep do we do this? You make the best food choices you can based on where you're at. This is a huge undertaking that we're talking about this week, right? How do we decolonize our diets? How do we fight climate change? How do we reverse all of this damage that we've done and that our society has done to the planet? How do we rebuild the relationships with plants that we've lost? How do we make those plants our relatives again? How do we learn to speak the same language again? Well, the first step, plant a garden. If you're able, it's good for the health of the earth, and it's good for the health of people. A garden is a nursery for nurturing connection, the soil for cultivation of practical reverence, and its power goes far beyond the garden gate. Once you develop a relationship with a little patch of earth, it becomes a seed itself. Something essential happens in a vegetable garden. It's a place where if you can't say I love you out loud, you can say it in seeds, and the land will reciprocate in beans. Again, from braiding sweetgrass, she says it better than I ever could. A garden is the first way, the best way to reconnect and get your hands in the soil and reestablish relationships and understand what a plant needs and wants, and be able to communicate with plants in a very intimate way. Now, a lot of us and a lot of our relatives have huge barriers to planting a garden. It's not that easy. And time and space and all of those things are, and financial resources are big barriers. Not everyone can just go out and plant a garden. Bermuda grass is a big barrier. I have a struggle with planting my garden because I can't get that shit out of my yard, So how do we meet ourselves where we're at on that? That's part of the work, is finding ways to introduce little bits of this. If you can't plant a full, huge vegetable garden because you don't have the land, you can plant a container garden on your balcony. You can plant one little herb pot in your kitchen windowsill. There's always a little tiny seed that you can plant, and it can be just that, just planting a seed. Or I remember my very favorite experiment from elementary school is the bean in the styrofoam cup, right? Do you remember that one where you poke your little finger and you put the bean and then you unearth it in a week, and it's like this magical transformation happens. You can just start one bean at a time, and that creates a relationship for you to learn about how plants live and what they need and what they want, and to reestablish a connection. And it doesn't have to be the way that you feed your family every single day, but do what you can. Not everyone has the time to tend to a huge garden. I know I have lots of friends who are either working 2 or 3 jobs and have all these kids, and they're like, I can't plant a garden, that's crazy. Community gardens can be planted. Live in community. Our ancestors did not do this alone. They weren't alone out there growing their foods and having relationships with plants. They had each other to support one another in that relationship building. So get outside and forage. Another way that we can start reestablishing that relationship with plants is to get outside and see the plants and learn where they are. Again, learn the things that they like. You know, it's like you want to enter into a relationship with plants, pick one and like date that plant for a year. Take the plant out to dinner, meet the plant's parents. Just a year. Like, it doesn't have to be anything serious, you're just hanging out, but get to know that plant, what it likes, what it doesn't like, all of those things over the course of a year. See how that plant changes and evolves and adapts and grows. And it can be just one plant, one thing that you choose. Maybe it's the purslane that you find growing up between the cracks of the sidewalk. Just pick that one plant. If you're in an urban area, that's what I tell people is, it doesn't matter how urban it is, you're going to find one plant, even if it's a tree on the sidewalk, and say, okay, I'm going to learn about this one plant and build a relationship with it. And it's like there's a gateway that opens, because once you learn about that one plant, you learn who that plant's friends are. And then all of a sudden, you're learning about who that plant's enemies are, or who that plant hangs out with. All of a sudden, you're learning about pollinators, and you're learning about, you know, it's this gateway drug that you can't stop. And so all it takes is just that one plant. And it can be slow because we have our lives to do this, right? This is not going to happen overnight. And again, like I was talking about earlier, building community. You might not be able to grow a garden at your home. Maybe you don't have the space, maybe you don't have the time, maybe you're just not a green thumb and you don't have a knack for that. But there are people in your community that do. And farmers markets are a great place to get connected with those people, because basically we're wanting to start small and work our way out, right? That's kind of the sliding scale of Indigenous food, and that's the way that I approach catering also. When I do big meals for people, is the first thing I want to do is, the ideal would be to have my own garden where I grow everything that I sell to people, and that way I can control and know exactly what I'm giving people and what I'm cooking. That's unrealistic, I can't do that. So the next thing is to work with farmers markets, to know that the people that I'm buying my produce from are using good practices, and that they are using seeds and growing plants that have that nutritionally dense content that I want, that's not going to be the plants, the produce that I buy at the grocery store that's devoid of that nutritional content because it's commercially farmed. So building those relationships, food co-ops are another way, and then your family, friends, and neighbors. Like what, again, Linda was talking about yesterday is, our ancestors didn't grow necessarily these huge gardens and then just feed their family. This was about community. So maybe you just grow one thing, or somebody that just grows one thing. Everybody has the one gift that they can give. And you can give that gift in return, receive something else that someone else is really good at growing. So these are relationships that we build with one another that in turn build our relationships with plants. Buy whole and buy simple. So once we've moved beyond being able to trade, barter, make deals with our family, friends, neighbors, go to the farmer's market, try our best to get those whole foods that are grown in a sacred way by people that we know. Inevitably, of course, you're gonna have to go to the store. Like, this is a modern world that we live in. We're gonna have to go to the grocery store. So how do we make good decisions while we're at the grocery store? Buying whole foods and buying simple foods. So when we cook our meals, we're trying to use things that are as close to exactly how they came out of the ground as possible. And that's the starting point, is we don't want to get too far away from there, because the further we stray away from there, the less nutrients we have, the less spiritual connection we have, the further we are away from the actual benefits and gifts of that plant. Because processed foods are the enemy here, right? That's the foods that are junking our bodies up, that are separating us from our culture, is the processing. The processing of those foods is what makes them difficult for us. So I kind of have a small example, a very simple example of this. Reading labels, keeping the ingredients list short and as close to the land as you can, right? And some of you I talked to about, I had a little epiphany last night while I was preparing for this and thinking about, okay, well usually I would have a box of like processed foods where I can read off all the really scary ingredients and say, just don't buy that, buy this one. But I didn't bring those, so I was looking around my hotel room and I was thinking, well, what do I have? I have these tea bags. I brought a couple favorite teas from home. And so there's this one. It's a rooibos tea. So the ingredients are organic rooibos, organic cinnamon, organic chai spice flavor, organic ginger, organic cardamom, organic clove, organic black pepper. I know what all of those things are. I know ginger, cardamom, clove, pepper, those came out of the earth, they were dried, they were put in a packet. That's the tea. That's a good one, right? That's a good choice. This one that I was talking to some of you about that I was so excited that they have back there, and it's my favorite. Now it's not my favorite anymore. Because I read the ingredients, and it says rose hips, spices, hibiscus, orange peel, roasted chicory. Those are all great things. Those are plants. That's great. But then, natural orange flavors and soy lecithin. Shit. That's not, soy lecithin does not come out of the ground. I can't go to the forest, I can't plant a soy lecithin seed. It is something that is chemically extracted from a soy plant, and it takes a lot of chemical processing to turn a soybean growing out of the ground into soy lecithin. It's an emulsifier. I really don't know why it needs to be in here. Like everything in this packet could have been preserved and dried and it would have been fine and it would have been delicious, but it's in there and now my favorite tea is ruined. So, but that's okay because I can dry orange peels and I can harvest rose hips and I can dig up chicory root and I can dry those things. And if I don't have time to dig up chicory root, or if it's not growing anywhere that I have access to, I can contact my friends in community and say, hey, do any of you have chicory root? I'm making this really cool tea blend, it's delicious, and there's no soy lecithin in it. And then I can make that tea blend and I can give it out to all my friends and we can all have that delicious tea without the weird preservatives and chemical additives. And be patient. That's the other thing, that's the big thing. Because this didn't happen overnight, right? We didn't get here overnight. Our food systems have been continuously colonized for over 530 years. Continuously colonized, meaning it's still happening right now, right? We're still being colonized. I was talking with my table that I was sitting at over our meal last night, talking about how one of the woman's neighbors was complaining about the creeping Charlie coming from her yard, right? Because he's got this perfectly manicured yard and she's got wild creeping Charlie growing everywhere and it was coming over on his side. And he was saying, you need to get that out of my yard. And long story, there was also a tree that ended up getting cut down while she wasn't looking. Also, colonization, still happening. Still talking about those, having to build those fences. But we've been here for 12,000 years, right? That's a lot longer than 530 years. We think 7 generations that came before us. They put a lot of work into observing that natural world and learning everything about those plants, and all of that knowledge is still there. And so it's up to us to preserve it and to learn it bit by bit, but it's not going to happen overnight. It might take the full 530 years to get back to where we were, but it can happen. And even though that climate change threat, it's a crisis, so it feels like we have to do something about it overnight. All of these little changes that we're talking about as we're here today, those are ways that we give our gifts back in reciprocity to try and make a difference for the 7 generations ahead of us. So that brings me to the part of the work that I do that is my most favorite part. I love catering for people. That's kind of the bread and butter of what I do, is providing meals and things like that, and doing teaching workshops on how to cook these traditional foods, how to reconnect with these foods in your life. But one of the themes that we've talked about a lot this morning is access, and that's a huge one. And in the urban area where I live in Tulsa, it's difficult to access this knowledge for people. And it feels far away because you're in that urban area and you're thinking, well, you know, I don't have all of this land, I don't have these wild spaces, I don't have these places where I can go and build relationships with the plants and animals and my elders and all of that. My tribe is so far away. And that's part of colonization and removal, is that we are dispersed. How do we bring that community back together? So this is the logo for my organization, Burning Cedar Sovereign Wellness. We've kind of expanded the Indigenous foods concept into a nonprofit organization where we are wanting to build an intertribal Indigenous community space dedicated to addressing socioeconomic disparities, health crises, cultural disconnection affecting the BIPOC community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, by reestablishing ancestral foodways, birthing practices, to people to improve the spiritual and physical health through ancestral ways of knowing. So this is the goal, this is the work that I am now doing in Tulsa, is to build this space where we can gather together. That's part of the steps that we're looking to take. Gather, heal, and grow. And that's what everything that we're doing here this week is about, is learning how to gather, whether that is, you know, it kind of has a double entendre meaning because it's gathering ourselves together here in community, physically gathering together, gathering resources from the natural world, gathering those gifts and putting them into our basket, using those gifts to heal each other, heal ourselves, heal our communities, and then growing. So teaching each other to grow things again, teaching each other to grow each other again, growing those relationships and healing in that way. So this is the work that we're wanting to do. This is everything that I've been learning from all of you here this week, is all of the opportunity that we have to teach each other and to learn from the natural world. So if you want to find me, burningscedar.org, that's where the website is, and everything about what it is that we do. And Widow, thank you so much for sharing your story with me today, and I look forward to the rest of this week.